Most people believe that success is about feeling motivated, about waiting for that surge of inspiration before they act. But here's the brutal truth. If you rely on motivation, you'll fail. Motivation will abandon you the moment life becomes difficult. The real question is this: what do you have left when motivation disappears? The answer to that question determines the entire trajectory of your life. Life is not a game of endless inspiration. Motivation is a fleeting state. It comes and goes like the weather. You might wake up one morning feeling ready to take on the world, but by the evening you're exhausted, disoriented, and the last thing you want to do is face the tasks that matter most. If your life is built on motivation alone, you are at the mercy of your moods, and that is a terrible master. Discipline is what steadies the soul. It is the structure that allows you to move forward when everything in you resists. Discipline does not ask whether you feel like it. It demands that you show up anyway. This is the fundamental rule that transforms everything. Because when you practice discipline, you transcend the volatility of your emotions and tether yourself to something higher, something stable, something enduring. Think of it this way: the individual who waits for motivation before acting is like the farmer who waits for perfect weather before planting seeds. He will starve. The conditions are never perfect, but the farmer who disciplines himself to work, rain or shine, ensures growth. That is life. If you want to grow, you cannot depend on fleeting bursts of energy. You must establish the routines, the rituals, the structures that make progress inevitable. Discipline is the pathway to freedom, not its enemy. People think rules constrain them, that order limits their individuality. That is false. True freedom comes only when you are not enslaved by your impulses. When you rise in the morning and make your bed, when you sit down and write despite the chaos of your thoughts, when you face the hard conversation instead of avoiding it, you are building a self that is not tossed around by every wind that blows. Motivation whispers to you in moments of enthusiasm. Discipline carries you through the silence when nothing whispers at all. And over time, those small acts of discipline accumulate into competence, into strength, into character. That is how you transform yourself and the world around you. If you live by discipline rather than motivation, you become the kind of person others can rely on, the kind of person who can endure hardship, the kind of person who creates stability where there was chaos. That is not merely self-help advice, it is a moral imperative. Because a disciplined individual is not just serving himself, he is contributing order to the lives of everyone he encounters. And in a world drowning in disorder, that contribution is priceless. So remember this: motivation will abandon you. Discipline will not. Choose discipline, and you will become more than you imagined possible. Motivation is often spoken of as if it is the secret ingredient to success, as though all you need is a powerful surge of enthusiasm, and everything else will fall into place. People wait for that perfect spark before they act, convincing themselves that once the right feeling comes, then the effort will finally begin. But this reliance on motivation is a dangerous illusion, because motivation is inherently unreliable. It is a fleeting psychological state, a momentary burst of energy that rises and falls without any predictable rhythm. You can feel unstoppable 1 hour and utterly defeated the next. To tether the course of your life to something so unstable is like building a house on shifting sand. When the ground inevitably moves, the entire structure collapses, leaving you vulnerable to discouragement and paralysis. If you depend on motivation to carry you forward, you will only work when the wind is at your back. And the moment that wind changes, you stop, you falter, and you regress. This is why so many people set out with bold intentions at the start of a new year, or after an inspiring video, and then find themselves right back where they began only a few weeks later. They mistook a surge of motivation for a lasting foundation, and when the feeling faded, so did their resolve. The deeper issue is that motivation is rooted in emotion, and emotions are some of the most volatile forces within us. They are influenced by countless external factors: sleep, diet, stress, environment, even weather. To say that your life will move forward when you feel motivated is to say that your destiny is tied to forces you cannot control. It is a relinquishing of responsibility disguised as enthusiasm. You wake up tired and suddenly the project is abandoned. You feel discouraged and suddenly the workout is skipped. You encounter failure and suddenly the dream is put on hold. Motivation thrives only in good conditions, and since life rarely offers us such conditions, those who depend on it are constantly derailed. What is required instead is the sober recognition that motivation may light the initial spark, but it cannot sustain the fire. It is a visitor, not a resident. It is an occasional gift, not a daily guarantee. This is why people who achieve mastery in any domain, athletes, musicians, writers, scientists, do not operate on the basis of motivation. They know better than to wait for the feeling to arrive. They act regardless of whether they feel motivated, and in doing so, they reveal a truth that is difficult for many to accept. Motivation is irrelevant in the long run. It is a distraction, even a trap, if you elevate it to the status of necessity. You may celebrate it when it comes, but you must be prepared to continue in its absence, because it will abandon you again and again. To anchor your life on motivation is to choose fragility. To recognize its unreliability is the first step toward building something stronger, something that does not depend on the shifting moods of the moment, but instead endures across the fluctuations of life. Discipline is what provides stability in the midst of life's unpredictability. Where motivation falters and emotions shift without warning, discipline becomes the anchor that holds a person steady. It is the practice of creating order out of chaos, the deliberate choice to act consistently regardless of how you feel in a given moment. The reason discipline is so powerful is that it does not rely on mood or circumstance. It is independent of whether the day feels easy or difficult, whether the body feels strong or tired, whether the mind feels clear or clouded. Discipline is the principle that demands consistency, and in that consistency, progress becomes inevitable. Unlike motivation, which disappears the moment resistance shows itself, discipline persists. It tells you to show up for your commitments even when every part of you would rather withdraw. It does not wait for perfect conditions, because it knows that perfect conditions never truly arrive. The stability that discipline creates is not only practical, but also psychological. When a person builds habits of discipline, they develop a trust in themselves that motivation alone can never provide. You come to know, through repeated experience, that you will act even when you do not feel like it, and that knowledge builds confidence. Each disciplined choice strengthens the foundation on which future actions are built. If you consistently rise at the same time, do the work you have committed to, and face the tasks you once avoided, your life develops a rhythm, a structure that protects you from the volatility of circumstance. This rhythm creates predictability and order, which are essential for any long-term endeavor. A person who practices discipline does not rely on chance moments of energy, but on a system that ensures effort is made every day. That system is what carries projects through to completion, transforms bodies through consistent training, and reshapes minds through sustained learning. Discipline also functions as a safeguard against despair. Life inevitably brings obstacles, setbacks, and disappointments, and these moments quickly extinguish motivation. Without discipline, those moments become roadblocks that halt progress. With discipline, they become temporary difficulties that are endured while the course remains steady. The disciplined individual continues to act even when the results are delayed, even when the rewards are not immediately visible, because the action itself is the rule, not the feeling. Over time, this stability produces results that cannot be denied. The person who reads every day becomes wise, the one who trains consistently becomes strong, and the one who saves a little each week becomes secure. None of these outcomes require bursts of inspiration. They require the stability of repeated action. What makes discipline superior is that it transforms effort into inevitability. If you have set the structure of your life around disciplined routines, then forward motion happens whether you feel motivated or not. This is why discipline is the true source of stability. It is the bridge between intention and reality, the force that ensures movement in a straight line even when every emotional impulse tries to pull you off course. Waiting for the right moment is one of the most common and destructive illusions people fall into. The mind convinces itself that conditions must be ideal before action can be taken, that there will come a time when the path is clear, the energy is abundant, and the outcome is certain. This belief appears rational on the surface, but in reality, it is nothing more than a sophisticated excuse for procrastination. Life does not present perfect circumstances. If you delay until everything aligns, you will be waiting forever, and the waiting itself becomes a form of surrender. The truth is that progress comes not to those who wait for the right moment, but to those who act despite imperfection, who are willing to begin when the soil is rocky and the sky uncertain. The image of the farmer illustrates this truth with striking clarity. If a farmer were to delay planting seeds until the weather was perfect, no storms, no droughts, no unexpected shifts in temperature, then nothing would ever be planted and nothing would ever grow. The harvest would never come, and the farmer would face starvation. The farmer who understands reality does not waste time wishing for perfect conditions. He acts with discipline, knowing that the only way to produce growth is to start when the season demands. Regardless of the obstacles, this principle applies to every area of life. The writer who insists on waiting for inspiration before putting words on the page will rarely complete a book. The person who postpones beginning a fitness routine until they feel motivated will continue to live in the same state of inertia. The entrepreneur who waits for the flawless business idea or the guarantee of success will never take the leap required to create anything meaningful. In each case, the waiting becomes the barrier, and the pursuit of perfection becomes the enemy of progress. By insisting on the ideal, the individual forfeits the possible. By waiting for the perfect moment, they squander the present one. The refusal to act until conditions are favorable also fosters fragility. Life is inherently unpredictable, full of shifting variables, sudden changes, and unexpected challenges. If action is tied to conditions being just right, then any disruption renders you powerless. But if you build the habit of acting regardless of the environment, then no storm can halt your progress. This resilience comes not from external circumstances, but from the internal choice to move forward without waiting. Each act of beginning under imperfect conditions strengthens your capacity to adapt, to endure, and to grow. The irony is that the so-called right moment often reveals itself only after you begin. Clarity comes through engagement, not before it. Momentum creates opportunity, not hesitation. Once you act, doors open that would have remained invisible had you stood still, waiting. It is only through disciplined action in less than perfect circumstances that conditions improve. The harvest does not come to those who hesitate, but to those who plant seeds in uncertainty and trust the process of growth. Discipline is often misunderstood as a form of restriction, as though it cages the individual and prevents freedom from being expressed. Many people recoil from the idea of rules and structure because they equate them with limitation, with a narrowing of possibility. Yet this belief is precisely inverted. The absence of discipline does not produce freedom. It produces slavery to impulse. To live without discipline is to be at the mercy of fleeting desires, urges, and moods that change by the hour. In such a state, there is no freedom at all, only compulsion. You may eat what you crave, but then your health collapses. You may avoid difficult work, but then your potential rots unused. You may indulge in distractions, but then your life slips by unnoticed. Each time you obey the impulse of the moment, you surrender a piece of yourself, and slowly you become dominated by forces you do not control. Discipline, by contrast, creates structure, and within that structure, freedom becomes possible. When you establish boundaries for yourself, you create an environment where you are no longer bound by chaos. A musician can only improvise freely because they first submitted to the discipline of scales and technique. An athlete can only express creativity in the game because they first submitted to the disciplined training of drills and conditioning. The same principle applies to every area of life. Discipline is what gives you the capacity to act deliberately rather than reactively. It removes the burden of constant decision-making because you already know what you have committed to. You do not debate whether to rise at a certain time or whether to complete the work before you. You do it because it is the rule you have set for yourself. That rule, rather than imprisoning you, liberates you from the chaos of indecision and the weakness of mood. True freedom is not doing whatever you want in the moment, because that path leads to destruction. True freedom is having mastery over yourself, the ability to say no to destructive impulses and yes to actions that align with your higher aims. It is the power to remain steady when emotions pull in 1,000 directions. Discipline builds this mastery through repeated practice, small acts of control that accumulate into strength. Over time, the chains of impulse loosen, and the individual becomes capable of pursuing meaningful goals without being derailed by immediate cravings. That is freedom from enslavement to the self's lowest instincts, freedom to choose a direction and walk it consistently, freedom to bring order where there was only chaos. This is why discipline must never be seen as an enemy of freedom, but as its very foundation. The paradox is that rules, far from constraining you, make genuine expression possible. The disciplined life is not narrower but broader, because it allows for stability, growth, and the realization of potential. Without discipline, freedom is nothing more than chaos disguised as choice. But with discipline, freedom becomes the ability to shape your life into something ordered, purposeful, and strong. Small acts of discipline may appear insignificant in the moment, but over time they accumulate into profound transformations of character. It is easy to underestimate the impact of daily habits because each individual action seems too minor to matter. Waking up early one day does not revolutionize your life. Writing a page in a journal does not instantly make you wise. Saving a small amount of money does not make you wealthy. Yet these consistent, disciplined choices compound in a way that mirrors the law of nature itself. Tiny seeds become towering trees, drops of water carve valleys into stone, repeated actions shape the very structure of the self. When you commit to even the smallest disciplines and repeat them over time, you are building something far greater than the action itself. You are building a foundation of competence, strength, and reliability. Character is not forged in grand gestures, but in the daily practice of order and consistency. The disciplined individual is not waiting for monumental opportunities to display their willpower. They are cultivating that willpower in the ordinary routines of life. Every time you follow through on a commitment, no matter how small, you reinforce the message to yourself that you can be trusted. This self-trust is the bedrock of confidence. A person who knows they will keep their word to themselves becomes resilient in the face of challenge because they are not negotiating with an unreliable self. They know that even when motivation fades or obstacles arise, the small disciplines they have built will carry them forward. The power of small disciplines lies also in their cumulative effect on identity. When you act in disciplined ways, you are not merely completing tasks. You are shaping the story you tell yourself about who you are. The one who exercises daily, even for a short time, begins to see themselves as someone who values health. The one who reads consistently begins to see themselves as someone who values knowledge. These identities are not abstract concepts. They are forged through repetition, and once they take root, they guide future behavior. In this way, small acts of discipline create a positive feedback loop. The more you practice them, the stronger your sense of self becomes, and the stronger your sense of self, the more naturally discipline flows. Over time, what began as small, almost invisible actions grow into competence. Competence then becomes mastery, and mastery shapes character. The disciplined student becomes the expert. The disciplined worker becomes the leader. The disciplined thinker becomes the visionary. None of this happens overnight, and none of it can be reduced to occasional bursts of motivation. It is the steady, almost unremarkable repetition of disciplined choices that builds a life of substance. The paradox is that while each act of discipline may feel small and even tedious, together they are the most powerful force of transformation available to any individual. Discipline is not a private matter confined to the walls of an individual's life. It radiates outward and shapes the environment of everyone who comes into contact with it. When a person lives with discipline, they create stability not only for themselves, but for those around them, and this influence is far greater than most people realize. A disciplined parent, for example, sets the tone for the household. Their children learn through observation that routines matter, that responsibility is real, that effort is non-negotiable. The order they impose on themselves spills into the lives of their family, creating a framework of security and predictability in which others can grow. A disciplined leader in a workplace becomes the anchor for the team, showing up consistently, holding themselves accountable, and by doing so establishing a culture where reliability and effort are the standard. Even in friendships and communities, the disciplined individual brings a sense of trustworthiness that others lean on in times of uncertainty. The absence of discipline, on the other hand, introduces chaos into every circle of influence. A parent who refuses discipline models disarray to their children, leaving them to wander without guidance. A leader who cannot control their impulses or manage their responsibilities destabilizes the group they oversee, causing anxiety, resentment, and inefficiency. A friend who constantly breaks promises or cancels commitments becomes a source of instability rather than support. In this way, personal discipline is never truly personal. It is a form of contribution, or its absence becomes a form of harm. The disciplined person contributes order, while the undisciplined person spreads disorder, whether they intend to or not. The reason this outward influence is so powerful is because human beings naturally look for stability. People want someone to rely on, someone who will keep their word, someone who can be trusted to act consistently, even when circumstances are difficult. When discipline is present, others feel safer, more grounded, and more willing to face their own challenges, because they know they are not alone in chaos. A disciplined colleague inspires discipline in others. A disciplined teacher raises the standard for students. A disciplined friend creates a bond that deepens because trust has been earned again and again through action. The ripple effect of one person's discipline can spread far beyond their immediate life and impact countless others in ways that may never be fully seen. In a world that is increasingly unstable and overwhelmed by distraction, the presence of even a few disciplined individuals can become a rare and invaluable resource. They provide an example that stands against the tide of impulsivity and disorder. Their actions, repeated with consistency, remind others that it is possible to live with integrity and focus. This is why cultivating discipline must be seen not only as a personal duty, but as a moral one. To live with discipline is to offer the gift of order to a disordered world, to steady the ground not only beneath your own feet, but beneath the feet of those who walk beside you. Motivation has the nature of a guest who arrives unannounced, stays for a while, and then disappears without warning. It is pleasant when it comes. It can lift your spirit and energize your actions, but it never promises permanence. You cannot rely on it to build anything that requires consistency because it cannot be summoned at will. Some mornings you may feel highly motivated, filled with energy and optimism, and other mornings you may feel nothing at all. If your life is built around waiting for that guest to arrive before you act, you will find yourself standing still more often than moving forward. Motivation is temporary, inconsistent, and unpredictable, and the reality is that it will abandon you at the very moments when you need it most. In contrast, discipline does not abandon. Discipline is the principle that shows up whether you feel inspired or not, whether you are in the mood or not, whether conditions are favorable or hostile. It is the commitment that anchors you when every emotional impulse pushes you toward avoidance or distraction. Discipline is enduring precisely because it is not dependent on mood. It is a decision made in advance, a rule that governs behavior regardless of circumstance. Once you commit to a disciplined practice, the question of how you feel about it loses significance. You wake up and complete the task not because you want to, but because that is what you have chosen to do. The very act of separating action from emotion creates a foundation of reliability, and over time that reliability becomes strength. Where motivation collapses under pressure, discipline endures because it is not fragile. It does not ask for comfort, it does not seek inspiration. It simply demands that you show up. This endurance is what allows discipline to transform a life in ways motivation never could. A person who relies on motivation may achieve flashes of progress, but will always relapse into stagnation when the energy fades. A person who relies on discipline may move slowly at times, but they move steadily, and steady progress compounded over months and years accomplishes far more than bursts of enthusiasm ever could. A writer who writes a page every day, regardless of mood, will eventually finish books. An athlete who trains consistently, even on the days when motivation is absent, will eventually build mastery. A student who studies according to schedule rather than according to mood will inevitably acquire knowledge that sporadic bursts of energy could never sustain. The rule that changes everything is recognizing that discipline outlasts motivation and choosing to build a life on that truth. When you commit to discipline, you free yourself from dependence on fleeting feelings and root yourself in action that does not waver. Motivation may visit, and when it does, it can be welcomed, but it is no longer necessary. Discipline carries the weight, discipline secures the path, and discipline ensures that you continue to move forward even when nothing within you feels like moving at all. Motivation may light the spark, but discipline keeps the fire alive. If you want lasting change, stop waiting to feel ready and start building the structure that carries you forward no matter what. Choose discipline over motivation, and you'll discover the strength to shape your life into something truly meaningful.